best leadership system that GW has ever come up with is Old World. Until Warhammer the Old World came out, leadership in Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy has always been white fucked. Let me explain. In Fantasy, the big problem was that armies would just shatter so quickly. So how it used to work, the enemy would let's say an enemy unit of cavalry charged your unit of infantry. What would happen is the charging unit would get to go first. They would make all of their attacks first. Every single one of your models that died basically reduced the amount of attacks that you could fight back with. So you could only fight with models on the front rank. So if you've got a unit, let's say a unit of orcs, 5x4, get 5 wide by 4, 20 strong, pretty typical back in the day. Get charged by a unit of Empire Knights. And the Knights were able to kill 5 orcs. The remaining 15 orcs didn't get to fight. Now, the problem was then that you then had to work out combat resolution. And let's say the orcs haven't fought, let's say the orcs didn't kill anyone. They've got a banner and an extra rank. The orcs will get what we'd call 2 combat resolution points. But the Empire Knights have killed 5. So each one of those points is a point towards combat resolution. Then they've also got their own banner. Then they've also got like an extra rank. So the orcs would lose by 5. The orcs would then have to take a leadership test at -5. On orc leadership is 7. So the orcs have to roll, and how your leadership test worked is you rolled 2d6, had to roll underneath the modified value. So 7 minus 5 is 2. The orcs would have to roll a double 1. If the orcs didn't roll a double 1, they fled. The knights would then get to pursue, because they're cavalry, I think it was like 3d6. So the orcs would statistically never get away. And if the knights rolled equal to or higher to what the orcs rolled, then all of the orcs died. They all got run down. So it was just too brutal. Basically, you would just have the person who charged pretty much always fucking won. And so they did, so it was just fucked. So 40k was pretty similar, to be honest. So 40k had a similar system where basically, back in the day where the charger would go first, you would lose. It was basically the same system at first. Now things did change because obviously 40k, it'd have things like, did your unit take 50% I think I remember off my head now. If your unit took a certain amount of casualties in a turn, they'd have to take a panic test, a leadership test essentially, from like shooting. But if they passed it, they would be okay. If you had 1 man left in a squad, they went down to like leadership 2, so they could only pass on like a double 1, all this kind of stuff. The cool thing about 40k leadership was that units would break from shooting. So let's say you've got a blob like 20 guardsmen, half them get killed. Let's say your leadership 7 on a guardsman, you roll like an 8, which back in the day you had to roll under, you had to roll low. Low was good. Your unit of guardsmen would flee. They'd flee like 2d6 inches towards the nearest board edge, or I think it was like d6 inches towards the nearest board edge, I can't remember. They'd break a little bit, but then at the beginning of your turn, they'd get a chance to rally. And if they rallied, then they turned back round. So I really liked that aspect of old school 40k leadership, because units could get absolutely shredded from range, but they'd have a chance to come back. And commissars could like shoot people and they'd like automatically rally. And, units that were led by officers were more likely to stick around. So it was the problem with 40k leadership again came down to close combat, where you had that whole like, you've lost combat by 5, so you just get fucking swept. And again, they had the whole thing where you break a certain distance and then the enemy got to pursue you. And what they used to have in like 3rd edition is an enemy unit. If you charged, broke an enemy unit in combat, and then ran them down, you could then overrun into another unit behind and fight that combat in the same turn. If you then broke the second unit, you could then overrun into a third unit and just keep going. So you could literally, you could have an entire flank swept by like Khorne berserkers as they consistently fought first, killed, broke the unit in front of them, just chopped and chopped and chopped. Very, very cool that a unit of Khorne berserkers could single-handedly take a flank. Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful at the same time. They changed it so that unit in 4th edition, so units couldn't overrun into a new unit. So the berserkers would kill one unit, break it, and overrun, then stop an inch away. But in a funny sort of way, that I think kind of broke the immersion a little bit, because they're just like, "Oh, we can't get you," kind of thing. Yeah. So then they changed it in 8th, and that's how basically leadership worked all the way up till 7th edition. In one form or another, units got broken and got ran down. Units got broken and got ran down. Then they changed it in 8th edition to basically the system we have now. It was actually a little bit more brutal in 8th edition. So what happened in 8th edition is you would work out combat like resolution as you did before. No, that wasn't it. There was no. I don't think there was any combat resolution in 8th. I can't really remember. But what happened is you took a leadership test, and for again, rolling low was good. And for every point that you rolled over your leadership, so let's say I'm leadership 7 on a guardsman and I roll a 9 on 2 dice. What would happen is you would lose 2 casualties. You'd lose you'd lose 2 additional guys. So let's say I've got a 20-man blob. I lose 10 people. I do a leadership test. I roll a 9. That's 2 above 7. I take 2 more casualties. I'd have 8 guys left. So that was kind of an interesting system because it meant that you didn't fuck around with units breaking and being caught down, and you didn't fuck around with like rallying or anything like that. But the idea was that the extra casualties weren't necessarily people like dying. They were models basically breaking and fleeing, like fuck this, and a few models just leaving. Or it represented like survivors of the squad like dragging wounded comrades off the board, and obviously by themselves being taken out of the fight. So it was really cool. I actually think the 8th edition system was the best system. I can't remember what morale was in 9th, but I think it was pretty similar. And then in 10th edition is the weakest it's ever been. 10th edition is truly the weakest. Battleshock is such weak sauce. Yeah. It's so Battleshock is the friendliest and softest morale has ever been. Yeah. It's so low impact on the game. It's insane. So I said before that Old World gets it right. I truly think that if we took the old morale from when you got shot to shit in 40k and combined it with the way morale works in Old World for melee now, I think we'd have, to be fair, basically take the Old World morale system. I think we'd have the perfect system. So how it works now is in Old World is you still have that whole like you work out combat resolution and everything, but if you fail your modified leadership, you don't break and flee. What happens is you fall back in good order. So let me just very briefly explain how Old World morale works and why it is the best morale system that 40k that GW has ever come up with. In fact, I prefer the Old World morale system to the bolt action morale system, because in bolt action, if you fail a morale check, your unit explodes and disappears. It's mad. Yeah, you just break and flee completely. It's bonkers. So Old World, this is how morale works. If an enemy unit, let's take those knights versus those orcs again. The knights charge into the orcs. They win overall. They win the combat by 5 points between kills, banners, ranks. They win the combat by 5 points. The orcs then roll their leadership. Now, if the orcs roll if they roll under their modified leadership, so let's say leadership 7 -5, so the orcs somehow manage to get the double 1. What would happen is they've lost the combat, so they still lost the combat, but they have given ground. So what that represents is basically they've stood firm, but they've physically been shoved back. What happens there is the orc unit just moves back 2 inches. Just 2 inches. They've not fled, they've not broken, they've just moved back 2 inches. The attacking unit then gets, I can't remember if they get the choice or if they have to follow up 2 inches. So it basically represents the lines have clashed and the attacking unit has physically been forced back a bit, but they've not broken, they've not lost formation or anything like that. They're just physically being pushed back. Then the attackers follow up. If you roll under your unmodified leadership, so in this case, the orcs roll, let's say they roll a 5 on 2 dice. So they haven't passed their modified leadership, but they have passed their unmodified leadership. This is when they fall back in good order. So what happens is they roll 2d6, pick the highest, they flee that far back, and then they automatically rally and turn to face the enemy again. So basically they're not actually fleeing, they're literally falling back in good order. So cool, like the idea of falling back in good order. The enemy unit then gets the chance to follow them up, or the enemy unit can choose to test to restrain. Now, the reason they might want test to restrain is it might give them an advantage in the next turn, because they might have won that combat in the orcs' turn, at which point they might want to test to restrain so that they're now free to go off and do something else. If the orc unit fails their leadership completely, so let's say they've got leadership 7 and on 2 dice they roll an 8 or a 9 or above, then they fully break and flee. Then the knights have the chance to pursue them, break them, run them down like the old system. So units are no longer anywhere near as fragile. And what actually happens, this is what I love about it, is you have this feeling of ongoing combats. Combats aren't just everything explodes. It's bang, fall back, bang, fall back, bang, fall back, bang. I'm just so fucked at this point, break and flee, run down. But there's a chance where it's like bang, fall back, bang. Oh, we fucked up. We didn't do as well as we thought we'd do in that charge. Now the unit that was attacking is now falling back. How the tables have turned. Now are you going to follow up? Yeah, fuck yeah, I've got him on the ropes. And it goes back and forth. And I've literally had battles where I've had a unit of Empire Spearmen. Literally, I've had it where my Empire Spearmen have turn after turn, fallen back against Chaos Knights, losing like half a dozen guys every turn, but just steadily just fucking thrusting away like, come on boys, come on, and finally just managed to break the knights and win the combat through sheer fucking numbers. Because it was like 5 chosen knights, which is 30 spearmen, and the last 10 spearmen were able to actually overcome the knights through sheer attrition. It was really, really, really fucking cool. If that had been an older edition of Fantasy, those knights would have gone in, smashed the fuck out the spearmen, all the spearmen break, the knights have run and killed them all. So that's how it works in close combat, and I think that would be a really cool system. So you have a unit of like berserkers go in, chop up half a platoon of guardsmen. I know you'd say they'd kill them all, but bear with me, I'm going to come back to that. Chop up half a platoon of guardsmen, and then the remaining guardsmen would fall back in good order, and the berserkers would follow up. What's cool, by the way, is Old World has rules that can force you to follow up. So the berserkers might be like, I really, really want to test to restrain. I don't want to chase these guardsmen out of this piece of cover. Yeah. So, because imagine this. You've got a platoon of guardsmen charged by a unit of berserkers. The berserkers hack their way through 10 guards. The guardsmen are in a ruin. The berserkers hack their way through the guardsmen. The guardsmen fall back out of the ruin. And the berserkers don't have a choice because they're frenzied, have to follow up. It adds a cool layer, a cool dynamic where the berserkers are like, they're gonna fucking slaughter those guardsmen, but they're gonna pursue them out of the terrain. So it could totally work in 40k. Do you know what I mean? And then you've got the whole, and then you've got the way shooting and morale works in Old World, where if you take 25% casualties in one go, you have to take a panic test. So a panic test is you take a leadership test, and if you fail it, you potentially fall back in good order. Now how that works is if you are above 50% strength, and again, we could tweak all these percentages for 40k, right? But if you're above 50% strength and you have to take a panic test, if you fail it, you don't just fucking flee off the board, you fall back in good order. So you could, let's say again, a unit of 20 guardsmen, they lose like 6 guys, they've taken they've taken a few casualties, they panic, they fuck up the leadership test, they fall back 6 inches, but they fall back d6 inches, essentially. Now that guardsman unit isn't fucked because in their turn they're gonna be back. They're gonna be good to go back. It just means they've kind of been pushed back a little bit from an objective. The guardsmen haven't been overly punished, not broken and flooded the board. They've just sort of bottled it for a minute before the NCOs are like, "Come on, lads, get back together." It's a cool system, and you only ever have to take one panic check a turn. So you could get fucking slaughtered down to like 3 guys, pass your panic test, you guys stick around, or they fail it and they fuck off. But yeah, now the thing is, you might be saying, but Mordian, in Old World, the idea of a unit of berserkers going in and only killing like 10 guards out of 20 is ludicrous. Well, here's the thing. Here's the problem. The number of dice that gets rolled in 40k now has exponentially gone up. The idea of a basic berserker getting 5 attacks is insane. It might seem normal if you've only played like 40k since essentially the Great Reset of 8th edition, but the idea of like a unit of berserkers, like 10 berserkers getting 50 attacks, is fucking insane. Like back in the day, everyone got 1 attack, and if you were lucky, you got 2 attacks. And it was like characters had like 3. And like proper named characters would have like 4. Now you might think that sounds kind of weak sauce, but that was equals pequals across the board, and it actually made a big difference. And it actually made a big difference because that's how it interacted with morale, because you would win those you wouldn't kill a whole blob of guys. You would kill enough to win the combat, so that then you would force them to break and flee. Now, like I said, back in the day, the results of breaking and fleeing were too limited. But were too harsh. You broke, you fled, everyone died. I think if you brought the Old World I would call it if you brought the remastered traditional morale system into 40k now, you could cut attacks. You could cut the volume of attacks down across the board exponentially. You could have berserkers go down to like 3 attacks on the charge, which is what they used to have. 2 attacks when they weren't charging. You could have Space Marines with like 1 attack each. Guardsmen with 1 attack each. That's what you could do. The fact that you've got like, I think like the Lion, the Primarch the Lion has like, I think he gets 20 attacks on the charge or something absolutely bonkers. It's something ridiculously insane. Like, I think the Lion gets like 20 attacks with his sweep, with like sustain, with like hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, wounding on 2s. He's like statistically like guaranteed now to kill like a whole blob. Now the reason why the Lion has got that many attacks is because There's no way of him breaking enemy units and forcing them to flee away from him. So in order for him to be impactful, he has to fucking kill every motherfucker in the room. The reason why Berserkers have so many attacks is because there's no way for them to break enemy models and do additional damage via other means. The reason they have so many attacks is because they might only get one chance to fucking rip and tear. So they have to do 50 attacks. If they only did 20 and they go in there and only kill 10 guardsmen, it's shit. But if those 5 berserkers or 10 berserkers can go in, kill most of a guard blob, and then scatter the rest to the wind, they've achieved the same result, but you haven't had to roll a million dice. But it adds nuance, because if they go in there and only force the guardsmen to fall back, those guardsmen, they might not all die, but by holding on and only falling back rather than breaking and fleeing for a turn, they're sacrificing their lives, they're delaying those berserkers. Now the berserkers got to spend another turn like hacking through them. Yeah. That's the thing. So I really think that morale, I really feel like the more that GW has dumbed it down, the more that they have basically indirectly upped the lethality of the game. Yeah. New Battleshock is meaningless, but the reason it's meaningless is no one ever gets the chance to take a Battleshock test, because in 10th edition, you're either alive or you're dead. You're very rarely in between, especially from a guardsman's perspective. I'm telling you now, boys, this was never, ever more apparent to me than when I ran those Tyranids. Running those Tyranids, I keep referring back to that, stream in, stream out. Running those Tyranids was an epiphany. It was an eye-opening moment for how far like 10th edition has gone, how much things have changed. It's like boiling the frog. Like, rather than being boiled, I fucking saw everything happen in one go. Like, the fact that five custodies consistently, not even 5, sorry, 4 fucking custodies consistently with dice to spare wiped out bricks of 20 termagants. I never got to take a morale test. I built a Tyranid list with 0 synapse. I had 1 Broodlord. I built a Tyranid list with 0 synapse. I didn't take a Battleshock test nearly the entire tournament. So my main my main army rule for Tyranids was irrelevant, and I was running big bricks at 20 bugs, the things that Synapse should be effective on. It never came up because I was either a full 20-man blob or I was nothing. I was wiped out. I was fucking dead. I reckon I took Battleshock test less than 5 times. Yeah. So that's it. The reason that Battleshock is super weak, it doesn't mean anything because A, even if you take a Battleshock test, it barely impacts the game, and B, you rarely get the chance to take Battleshock, and that's because the game is rolling too many dice and it's too fucking lethal. And again, I've said it before, I won't say it again. I've got a super chat coming in from Trooper here, so I want to do that. But before I finish this rant, I'll say something that I've said once and I'll say it again. 40k has so many dice rolls and so many re-rolls and so much lethality in some cases and then so much durability in other cases. You have all of these dice rolls and re-rolls to stop people's feelings from being... When I play 40k, when someone charges one of my units with one of their combat units, it is 90, not even 99% of the time, 100% of the time, a foregone conclusion. That unit of berserkers, that unit of 8-bound, that unit of custodies is going to slaughter 20 guardsmen every single time. There is no doubt about it. I cannot remember a single time in the last 18 months when a combat unit hasn't absolutely splattered something in combat. And likewise, I can't remember the last time when a shooting unit hasn't gone completely fucking ham, and when my opponent has wanted to kill one of my units, hasn't killed it. The only exception to that is I have called people out with how durable Dawns can be, but that's the only exception. Okay? Basically, things are, you are almost guaranteed to get the, it's special. You know what? It's what I just said is about 50% true in shooting. It's 100% true in combat, though. 40k, you always get the dice roll you were expecting, because there's either rerolls, or there's lethal hits, or there's sustained hits. How many times have you rolled a little shit on your dice, but sustained hits came in and meant that you got the normal amount of hits you should have statistically got? It sort of cradles your balls. It catches you. 40k has all of these dice rolls, all these rerolls, to stop people's feelings from being hurt, because people were sick of going. People complained and bitched and moaned and complained and bitched and moaned and whined and complained and bitched and moaned and whined incessantly about, oh, well, my Space Marine captain went in and he had 5 attacks and he was hitting on 3s and he missed 3 of them. That's bullshit. My Space Marine captain shouldn't have missed those, and they got their fifis hurt, so they bitched and complained. So now the dice are almost guaranteed. And this is, again, never more apparent than when you go and play a game that isn't 40k. When you go and play Old World, and you have your Empire Captain hitting on, he's Empire Captain, and he's hitting on 3s with the Sword of Battle, and he goes against some clan rats, and he misses 3 times. It happens. It happens all the time. It doesn't happen like every time, because then that would just be like shit in its own way. But once a game, you're going to have a character go and just fucking fluff the attacks. But no, and bot actually like, okay, so I'm going to roll my German machine gun. I've got 7 shots hitting on 4s. I should get 3 or 4 hits. I didn't hit. I just rolled 7 shots hitting on 4s. I didn't hit. And if that was 40k, you'd have rerolls on that MMG or sustained hits or something to cradle the balls, to make yourself feel better. Yeah. And that's why someone asked me earlier, why do I love Vanquishers? That's why I love Vanquishers, because Vanquishers, as Mini Dingbat says, is you're kind of getting that excitement back in. Ooh, will you hit the Vanquisher or will you not? Ooh, you got the hit. Ooh, will you get the wound or will you not? Ooh, you didn't get the wound, but you got the reroll, so it kind of saves your ass, right? But anyway, you got the. Let's say you got the wound. Oh, does your opponent make the 50-50 save? Whoa! You know, it adds that. Woo! It adds the drum roll back in. That's what 40k is missing. It's missing the drum roll. So in short, DMAC, no, there's never been a time when morale has been impactful. There's never a time when GW has got morale right in 40k, but they did get it. They did get it right with Old World, and they should take the Old World system, transfer it over to 40k, and use that system to then be able to decrease the lethality of the game and decrease the amount of dice in the game, which would speed the game up and allow the game to be a little bit less predictable. There you go. That's what I think that would be a really, I don't know if it would fix 40k, but it would be interesting. Here's the big thing, and this is the last point I want to sum up on. Okay, when was the last time that someone say, I lost that game because of bad dice? You almost never do anymore. Like, you still see it. There's always going to be Reddit posts. There's always going to be Facebook posts and whatnot. But back in the day, every other post was someone talking about a battle report or talking about cold dice or complaining about cold dice or something. That it always was the way. Now you see it, but you see it less and less often. And that's because less and less people are having bad dice because there's more and more rerolls in the game. And, the biggest complaint you used to see people say was not only bad dice from when they were shooting, but how they'd have like a leadership 9 rollable test and they'd fuck it up and lose an entire unit. and that was again morale based. People used to get really, really bent out of shape with fucking up morale tests and entire units getting obliterated. This is why I think they need to make. This is why I think the old world system's so good, because in old world, you the great thing about the old world system is it cuts both ways. And it's the last thing I've got to say about morale. Okay, last thing, and I've got 2 super chats to catch up on, and then I need to actually wrap the stream up. In old world, if you go in and fuck someone up in combat, if they pass, let's say, their leadership 9 morale, but they pass the unmodified version, they fall back in good order. Even if you follow them up, they've got a chance. They've got a chance at some point to try and turn the franchise around. It's like, okay, my unit's been bad, but it's still in the fight. Likewise, if you go in there and fuck your attack, if you go in there as the attacker and flub your attacks, you're not going to get broken and run off the board and lose everything. What happens is you go in, you flub your attacks, you go, oh dear, then you fall back in order and the enemy gets to chase you up, and then you have another go next turn. So because morale is impactful but not hyper lethal, both sides, whether you're the one flubbing the dice or having dice flubbed against you, both sides have a chance to seize the initiative or get themselves back into the fight. But yeah, that's why I think it would be that's what I love about it so much. The amount of times when I've had like a hard pressed unit get 1 round of breathing room and start turning the franchise around happens every other game. Every other game. Sometimes you just can't win. Sometimes it's like, Unit of Ratago just beating the piss out of some free company. Sure, you can't do anything about that. But sometimes them just holding on for turn after turn can allow you to do stuff elsewhere. You can kind of judge, I think they're gonna break in a couple of turns. But I've got a couple of turns to try and go elsewhere on the battlefield. It's just really cool, man. Yeah. So that is my explanation of why an RBMK reactor explodes. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.